Evening and welcome. Tonight is Monday, February 22nd, 2021. It is 7 o'clock p.m. This is the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter. This meeting is being held in person and virtually, and we are again back at the Governor's Room in the Community Center. We will call the meeting to order. Would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone hopefully has a copy of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, no changes, just the additional or the corrected resolution that we provided the council a little earlier in the day.
Right. Hopefully everybody got that when we get to that item in new business. If there is nothing else, is there a motion to approve?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Ed 1, Shannon 2. All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have the minutes from our February 8th, 2021 regular meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 5 through 9. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Carrie Johnson will make a motion to approve.
Ed will second.
Emily will second.
Okay, we got Carrie 1, Emily 2. All in favor of the minutes as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we have the minutes from our February 16th, 2021 special meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 10 and 11. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next up, we have a public hearing, and the first one is on an administrative lot split request. And Russ, all yours.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. This is the third planning action that's been requested by Brad Baker. Brad owns the lot that's been given an address of 967 North 3rd Street. This is the property immediately south of 3rd Street from what is now the High V development. I'll refer you to the overhead photo on page 56.
Excuse me, Russ, I made an error. We will open this public hearing at 7:03 p.m. on Monday, February 22nd, 2021. And after you get done, I will go through some of the rules that I've neglected also to state. Go ahead. Sorry, Russ.
No, that's okay, Mayor. I'll refer everybody to the map, overhead photo that's on page 56. That shows the Baker property. The blue sections are parts of lots 10, 11, 12, and 13 of Norman subdivision. In the upper, what would be the left-hand corner, which is kind of a gray color, that's former right-of-way of 3rd Street. For those that aren't familiar, when the Shopko, now High V development was done, we provided a right angle to 3rd Street. Prior to that, it took more of a gradual curve. And so when that plat was accepted, a land swap was undertaken with Northern ConAg, the property owner, to assemble a rectangular parcel there. Mr. Baker has gone through a couple other planning actions. The Board of Zoning Appeals has provided him with a conditional use. As you're aware, the City Council has taken action to provide a modest amendment to the gateway ordinance to only require the gateway finish on the facades facing the street or park if the property is west of Old Minnesota Avenue, in which case this property is. The planned field house development is oriented toward the south part of the lot, and Mr. Baker could provide for the split that he's requesting, and the south development, subject to the conditional use permit, would meet all of the requirements of the zoning ordinance as to setback and such, and lot coverage. Mr. Baker is proposing the administrative lot split to provide an independently developable lot north of his planned field house development. So what would become lots 10 and 11 would be a separate lot from 12 and 13. The field house is proposed to be built on 12 and 13. Actually, the administrative lot split may have been recommended by the Planning Commission. As you're aware, the gateway ordinance would only apply to the facade of the field house facing 3rd Street. If the north lot then is independently developable, according to the action you have recently taken, the gateway finish would have to be exposed on the north and west facade then, given that they're both facing 3rd Street. If you approve the lot split, both lots will meet the minimum requirements of the C4 zoning ordinance. And they are just about approximately 17,010 square feet each. There's some very minor differences on the dimensions. And the minimum requirement in that zoning district is 15,000 square feet. The minimum requirement in the C4 is to have a 100-foot frontage, and both frontages of the lot, all lots would then exceed the 100-foot requirement. The Planning Commission has considered this action at their last meeting, and they have recommended that the City Council provide for the approval of the administrative lot split as requested by Mr. Baker. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Okay, we'll go back to what I should have said earlier. On a public hearing process, it's the staff presentation, which Russ just did on this case. Next, if there's an applicant available that wants to make some comments. And then the final is anybody for open public comment. So is there anyone, Russ? I don't see Mr. Baker again, and as you're sneezing, I guess, is there anyone that would like to speak as far as the applicant presentation? If not, is there anyone at all that would like to speak speak on this matter? All right, what we usually do is we hold our questions. Thank you, council, for holding questions, because this will be coming up under new business, and we will be taking it up at that time. So if you have questions then of Russ, we can handle them then. If there is no other comments, we will close the public hearing for the administrative lot split request at 7:08 p.m. on Monday, February 22nd, 2021. Next up, we have a public hearing for a street alley vacation for Hatch Streets and the north-south alleys that go with it. Once again, the same rules applies as far as the staff presentation, applicants, and the public comment. We will open the public hearing for the street alley vacation on Monday, February 22nd, 2021 at 7:09 p.m. And Russ, your speaker's not, you're muted, Russ.
Thank you.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Mayor, council members, you'll remember at the last meeting you undertook a couple actions to provide for a clear title as Quick Trip looks to repurpose the former Seitzer Ford, or more recently the Anytime Fitness development. Pardon me. At this point, there's a couple more actions that are needed to undertake to help clear up the title. And the first is there are platted streets and alleys within the 2 blocks that Quick Trip is intending to purchase. The closing is scheduled later for this week. They have requested that you provide for the vacation of Hatch Street, which was part of the Traverse Day Sioux development, as well as then the north-south alleys within Block 101 and Block 102. Again, the Planning Commission has considered this matter, and they have recommended that you provide for that vacation as petitioned by Quick Trip. I will note then, and I apologize, I had a misunderstanding from my conversation with the city attorney, which has resulted in you getting some information at the last minute. But there is also a quit claim deed, and I believe the city administrator has distributed a map. It may be remnant right away. We're not actually sure how the city required or acquired access, but as you're well aware, the Seitzer Ford or the development that currently exists is built over top of that. So with no particular interest of the city to maintain ownership, a quit claim deed has been prepared for your consideration then that would provide for a transfer of ownership of that property to Quick Trip Inc. Excuse me. and I don't have a copy. It's not Quick Trip Inc. Perhaps the city attorney could help me out here.
For who the quick claim deed is to? To Hennik Business Holdings.
There you go, and then that would be transferred to Quick Trip when they complete the purchase later this week.
Okay. Anything else, Russ?
Not that I can think of, Mayor.
All right. Once again, is there an applicant that would like to speak on this matter?
I'm here, Mr. Mayor. It's Dean George, 1626 Oak Street, La Crosse, Wisconsin. Here on behalf of Quick Trip. Would just like to say thank you guys for hearing this request. Sorry this has come to you a couple different times, but we're looking forward to closing on all these parcels of land out there and getting a new store built in your community. For the second time, it'll be under construction next year.
Okay, great. We are glad to have you on both the south end and the north end now.
Awesome.
It's amazing. The traffic that is down there, and love seeing people spend money in town and maybe making a few other stops, and I think you're helping us with that cause. So, all right.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak on the applicant's behalf? Anyone that would like to make any public comments on this matter? If not, we will close the public hearing for the street alley vacation of Hat Street and the north and south alleys on Monday, February 22nd, 2021 at 7:12 p.m. Once again, council, this will be under letter A when it comes up here in new business, and we will have that and then the additional quitclaim resolution too. All right, next up we will address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any of the agenda items? Seeing no one, is there anyone on the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 13 and concludes with the resolution on page 35 and includes the following budgeted items in excess of $10,000. To Farmers Mill and Elevator for 2021 fertilizer for $19,749. Following license applications. Temporary gambling license, both of these. One of them for the Church of St. Peter for 1801 Broadway Avenue for March 20th, 2021. And to Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for 400 West Union for April 24th, 21. The following employee appointments. To Sarah Daly for police officer at $28.40 per hour. To Mitchell Tierstieg for police officer for $28.40 per hour. To Michelle Lopez for part-time bus driver at $17.05 per hour. Plus the regular schedule of disbursements for February 4th, 2021 through February 17th, 2021. Are there any questions or comments concerning the consent agenda? Carrie.
Well, I just wanted to say, this is Carrie Johnson. I just wanted to say that I appreciated the how the hiring process for the officers were included. And I don't know if that's standard procedure or if it's just come up lately, but I appreciate that was very thorough. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, the resolution for approval of the consent agenda appears on page 35. Is there a motion to approve?
Noel so moves.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Shannon 1, Carrie 2. Any questions now? Any more questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye. Consent agenda is approved. Next, we have unfinished business, which there is none, so we will move to new business. And the first item up is the, let me just see here, the North Third Street and McLeod Street project debt issuance. And I guess Sally's
Mr.
not here tonight?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, normally Sally would be here and tag team with Shannon, but Sally's unable to be here this evening, so Shannon's going to do the heavy lifting for us. As you know, Shannon Sweeney's from David Drown and Associates, and they've been your financial advisor for, well, a long time. So Shannon is here tonight, and, well, there, we can see him, so that's great. So Shannon, if you want to take it away from there, if you're okay with that, Mr. Mayor, we'll
Yeah,
let him go.
that's fine. Shannon, can you handle this on your own? Looks like you can. I think you can. Go ahead, Shannon.
Oh,
We can't hear him.
yeah, for some reason, Shannon, we could hear you before.
There it is.
There
Sorry.
you go.
They shouldn't give a guy 2 mute buttons. Included in your packet this evening was a memo for me, along with a resolution. The requested action for this evening is to initiate the process for the competitive sale of bonds that would be used to finance the costs associated with North 3rd Street. I forget the entire name of the project, North 3rd Street Center and McLeod Streets project for 2021. We've received bids for that project, and so we're able to now size a bond issue appropriately to finance the costs that we believe will be incurred in order to implement this project. We're proposing to finance all costs associated with the project and borrow that money over an approximately 15-year term. That's consistent with a significant portion of the revenue stream that will be used to repay these bonds, which is special assessments that will be levied against benefited properties. Based on our estimate of total project costs, including the costs associated with issuing the bonds and capitalized interest, meaning we're borrowing the initial interest payment that we'll be making before we can collect our first tax levy or special assessment payment, we estimate those total costs at $722,880.40. We're proposing to issue $720,000 in improvement bonds to fund those costs. The proposed issue will have annual debt service payments of about $53,000 per year over the 15-year term. I included a sample cash flow that shows the annual payment structure, what we're projecting for interest rates, and the repayment sources that will be pledged. What we're pledging for repayment is a combination of special assessments, as I've mentioned, and tax levy. A portion of this issue is going for improvements that assist our water and sanitary sewer utilities, and staff will have the flexibility to make transfers to offset a portion of that levy, and those transfers might reflect the actual cost to the water and sanitary sewer systems. As they were more modest costs, we can save a little bit on issuance and administrative costs by simply making that tax levy pledge and then having the flexibility to manage this debt over time by simply establishing a percentage or a specific dollar amount that we would transfer annually from the enterprises for their share of the project cost. We had some pretty specific recommendations, with regard to term in looking at that 15-year term and structuring it around the revenue stream that we have coming in for special assessments. Most of the assessments will be over that 15-year term. The bonds could first be called or prepaid as of February 1st of 2028. So until that time, we won't be able to make a prepayment. Why do we have that? It's because investors that buy our bonds want to understand that they'll earn interest for at least a period of time that's defined. And the industry standard used to be 10 years, but we've pushed on that some for 15 or 20 years. And we feel pretty confident that at a 7-year call date, we're not increasing the interest cost. And so that's essentially what we've used. We are proposing to sell these bonds through a competitive sale process. And that means we're preparing an offering document called an official statement that describes the bonds in detail, the creditworthiness of the city, your ability to repay the debt. It looks at all of your outstanding debt, what's happened with your market values as a community. And we also purchase a credit rating through this process, which is a third-party analysis of your ability to repay this debt issuance. That credit rating is what really turns this into a bit of a known commodity that the market can bid on with some confidence, in that they'll understand, ultimately what your repayment ability is. And so it's worthwhile in obtaining when we achieve issues of this size or bigger. It is an expense, and then there is a fair amount of hassle factor, as your administrator would tell you, in going through this process. But at the end of the day, it will save us a fair amount of money. Evaluations in the past have been close to 0.75% on interest rate. And so we believe it to be worthwhile in this instance, and ultimately that'll save far more than it costs to go through that process. Interest rate I've projected at this time is just under 1.5%. As I communicated to Todd earlier this evening, we've seen some upward movement in the last few days in the market. But as you know, we can't time the market, and ultimately it still is at historic lows. And so if we're borrowing money for projects, now is about as good a time in our history as we can, because again, we're talking about interest rates that are in that range of 1.5% over a 15-year term. Our schedule, if you choose to proceed, is you're being asked tonight to initiate the competitive sale process. It takes some time for us to assemble the official statement, more importantly, obtain the credit rating. So you would actually see bids for the purchase of these bonds from underwriters or folks that buy and then resell bonds. We would see bids on or about March 22nd, which would be presented to you that evening at your meeting for award. If we received an acceptable bid, we would award that evening and then close on or about April 6th, which is when funds would be available to pay project costs, which should be well in advance of mobilization and that sort of thing by the contractor. So we should be in good shape. More than happy to answer your questions on the requested action. Happy to cover whatever I can that I missed in the materials I provided.
Thank you, Shannon. Questions for Shannon? No one?
I do have one.
All right, go ahead, Ed.
And this is a small one, but on the bottom of the first page there, it's not the bottom, but it's cash contributions at $28.80. What is that?
Yeah. Well, bonds are sold in increments of $5,000 typically. And so we can either round up or round down. And this time I rounded down and said that the city ultimately would come up with $2,880 in cash towards the project. Ultimately, it probably fits within the contingency factor for the project. Additionally, we do earn some interest on the funds as we're sitting on them during the period of construction. It probably won't be quite $2,880, but ultimately, if we didn't like the rounding down, we could borrow another $5,000, and then we'd have a rounding figure up on the source side of funds of about $2,200. So it's again, it's because bonds are sold in increments of $5,000.
Okay, I didn't know that, so thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cash down payment. That would come from your PIR funds.
Okay. Anyone else? The resolution providing for the competitive negotiated sale of $720,000 general obligation improvement bonds appears on page 39. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Ed 1, Carrie 2. Any questions or comments now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the 2016 Traverse Green subdivision debt refinancing. And Shannon.
Yep, Shannon again, if he's not tired from heavy lifting the last one.
We're getting a little wind or whatever feedback from somebody. I'm not sure where.
I think it's Shannon's microphone. I muted him for just a second there.
Okay.
There
Let
you
me
go.
move it away.
There you go.
I'll try that. Sorry about that. The second issue that we have is very similar in that the action before you is to initiate the sale process for a competitive sale of bonds. In this instance, it's for the refinance of some existing debt that the city has outstanding for the Traverse Green subdivision project. We have just over $2 million in debt outstanding on that project, and we have an opportunity to issue bonds at a lower interest rate over the same term simply to save money. The analysis that I included in your packet indicated savings of about $145,000, and that's after issuance costs are paid. And so it's a true net savings number. It's an actual reduction in payments. I again communicated with Todd earlier this evening that I looked at a sale by the city of Mankato today, and interest rates have been increasing the last 3 or 4 days. And ultimately, I'd project those savings at closer to $125,000 today. Reason we wanted to do this in a similar timeline as your improvement bonds that you just started the sale process on is mostly because we can save roughly $10,000 in the cost of a credit rating by doing both at the same time. The incremental cost of adding this issue to the credit rating process is about $2,000. If we went out on our own and rated this independently of the other issue, we would pay about $12,500 for the credit rating. Other issuance costs aren't impacted by timing, but the credit rating expense is, and $10,000 at the end of the day is a lot of money, and if we can save it by doing credit ratings simultaneously, we try to do that. My recommendation earlier to Todd was that, for the incremental cost of $2,000, we're still projecting some fairly significant savings, and I thought it was worthwhile to proceed with the issue in the credit rating process. As it takes probably 2 to 2.5 weeks to get that credit rating, what I had indicated is that if for some reason interest rates continue to climb and all of a sudden our savings aren't looking that great, we can certainly pull it from that process and not incur any expense. So ultimately, my recommendation still today is that we consider proceeding with a competitive sale, that we obtain the credit rating, and that we ultimately restructure this over the same term as the original bond issue. If for some reason interest rates continue to rise, we can certainly quit this process, and the only obligation you would have as a city is for the $2,000 in incremental cost on the credit rating, and that credit rating would actually be good for about a 3-month period. And so, long term, the underwriters are saying that they have no fear of inflation, and that's generally what's driving interest rates up. They're saying there's still a lot of capacity in the industrial sector. There's still a lot of folks that are laid off. And before inflation sets in, all those folks would have to be put back to work, and all of that plant capacity would have to be used up. And so they're saying, at least for a while, they're not seeing significant signs of inflation. And so it leads us to believe interest rates are going to stay in this similar area as they are today. And so our recommendation is the same. If you think it's appropriate to proceed, there's a resolution that's very similar to the last one that you passed that initiates the competitive sale process. Timeline for this one is similar in that we would look to receive bids on March 22nd. We would push out closing to April 22nd on this one because we have to provide 30 days notice to call the old bonds. And so we don't want to receive the funds until we're able to use those to pay off the old bonds. With that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions regarding the materials that I provided.
Okay, questions? Brad?
Shannon, thanks for the detail. So my questions, to clarify, the city would be putting up essentially 3804, and we'd be saving about 125,000. Is that the deal?
You're actually, the 125,000 savings is net of that issuance cost. So you're reducing your payments by that much, $125,000.
Okay, and then the follow-up is, are there any Nigerian princes involved in this deal based off of that?
No, we're still a community of size where the bidders that are bidding on the purchase of these bonds are the underwriters. And frankly, I suppose they could be selling to Nigerian princes for all I know. But at the end of the day, the folks that we're making the initial sale to are Minnesota or Wisconsin companies, probably 80% of the time, if not more. And so it's in all likelihood, the bonds are sold to a Minnesota company and then resold to Minnesota investors, because those folks understand the creditworthiness of St. Peter, Minnesota the best. And so that's typically what happens. A lot of times they end up with a bank, a lot of times even local banks are purchasers. So that's basically how the process works.
Okay, yeah, I just had to give you a little bit of a hard time on that. I thank you very much for actually putting this together and helping to save the city money. I do appreciate that, so.
Anyone else?
You're welcome.
The resolution providing for the competitive negotiated sale of $2,120,000 general obligation tax increment financing refunding bonds, appears on page 48. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move, Mr. Mayor. This is Steve Grimes.
DeVos will second.
Okay, I got Steve 1 and Brad 2. Any other questions or comments now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Thank you, Shannon, for your time. I knew you could do it all on your own. Great job. Next up, we have the administrative lot split request, and if I refer to this earlier with the wrong number, whatever, or letter, whatever the case may be, this pertains to the first public hearing we had earlier tonight. And Russ.
Yep, Mr. Mayor, I'll tell you how humbling it is to follow Shannon Sweeney. So he's so clear and concise in his reports, but I don't intend to go through my full report again, but Mr. Baker has proposed a lot split that would create two properties that would conform to all of the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and the matter has been recommended for your approval by the Planning Commission.
Okay.
And I'd answer any questions that you or council members may have.
Questions for Russ? Shannon.
This is actually just a comment, which is to say regarding this resolution and the next, that there have been really great conversations at the Planning Commission level. Those members are all really knowledgeable, always come very well prepared for the meetings, and so I just want to make that remark and extend thanks to them for their consideration and their good work in the last few months.
Okay. Anyone else? I could make it later, but I'm going to make this comment now. Not only the planning, we have a lot of talented people in this community, and we are glad for all of their input on boards and commissions. The resolution approving the waiver of subdivision for lots 10 to 13 Norman subdivision, City of St. Peter, appears, and accepting the administrative lot split, appears on page 58 and 59. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Ed 1, Shannon 2. Any other questions or comments now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the Hatch Street Alley vacation request, and this is the one where we have the extra resolution for quitclaim, and this refers to our second special meeting that we had public hearing, wow, that we had earlier this evening. Russ again.
Mayor, members of the city council, again, I'll be brief in my second report, but you've been requested to provide for the vacation of Hatch Street, which is part of the Traverse des Sioux development, as well as the north-south alleys in blocks 101 and 102. Also then, the quitclaim to that property of unknown acquisition, but again, all of these properties were subject to development from the sites report, which essentially built over top. As Quick Trip is looking to make a multi-million-dollar investment, they would like to have some assurance that the title issues are addressed to their benefit. So again, the Planning Commission has recommended that you undertake the action that's requested of you tonight. And I'd answer any questions that Mr. Mayor or you or members of the council might have.
All right, questions for Russ on this one? Ed?
Russ, wouldn't have this alley and stuff been vacated back when Seitzer's built it? Or are we just
I would
repeating
say,
it?
Councilman Johnson, that it should have been, but it hadn't been. So we're trying to just clean up some title issues to the benefit of Quick Trip.
Okay, that explains it. I was just kind of curious.
Anyone else? The resolution approving the vacation of Hatch Street and north-south alleys as platted between and within blocks 101 and 102 appear on pages 65 and 66. Is there a motion for approval?
Carrie Johnson will make a motion to approve.
Emily will second.
Carrie 1, Emily 2. Any other questions or comments at this point? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat, or DeVos, sorry.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the resolution approving the vacation of Hatch Street and the north-south alleys between blocks 101 and 102, between and within blocks 101 and 102, and executing a quit-claim deed to Hennik Business Holdings, LLC. This would have been on the thing that we have gotten emailed to us sometime this afternoon. Is there a motion to approve?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Ed 1, Shannon 2. Any questions on this? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
That resolution is approved. Next up, we have a lease of agricultural land to the Annex steads, and Mr. Brandt.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and council members, this is another lease of farmland. Back in 2013, the city purchased about 75 acres of land along either side of Broadway Avenue. And they cooperated with the school and built the school and developed city parks. On the south side of Broadway lies a triangular tract of 11 acres that the city has leased to Brett Anningsted for the past several years. When the city bought the 75 acres, Brett leased that from the city for a couple years. And now, as I understand, there's no current development plans to deal with the 11 acres. So the choice of the city is to lease the land either to Brent or somebody else, or turn it to grass and maintain it. So Brett has come forward and asked to lease it again. He's willing to pay the same lease rate as he paid in the past years. I've checked with other landowners that rent sand in the lower area, and it's a lower rent than what people get on the ridge land where you get clay soil and stuff. And what I found is this is a very competitive rate and maybe a little higher than what other farmers are getting in the area. So I would and from my recollection, Brett has always done a good job. He's kept the ground clean and has been a decent tenant. So I would recommend the city approve the lease again, as it has in its probably about the last 5 years on this 11-acre tract. It stands for any questions the council may have.
Questions? Brad?
I'm just curious, and maybe this is for Todd. Where do the funds go? Is it just does it just go into the general fund, or is there a special park fund or something this goes into?
The park fund? General fund. General fund, excuse me.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Jim, I don't know how much time you expend on this, and we don't have anything on the horizon for this parcel. And I know some farmers, it's only 11 acres, but should we maybe look at doing like a 2-year lease and maybe saving a little paperwork and your time in between?
That we could. I mean, it basically, I think the reason was we just didn't know what was on the horizon.
Right.
I mean, if the council's comfortable with a longer lease, if the council's comfortable that nothing's going to pop up in the 2 years.
Well, even if it does, it takes that long to to generate something, and by the time it gets going. Todd, I don't know if you have any qualms about anything like that?
No, I think anywhere that you go, Mr. Mayor, will be just fine. Jim handled this from the beginning for drafting.
Right.
And so we've just allowed Jim to continue to move forward with that. But certainly this time or next time, I can't speak for Mr. Annex.
Right.
But if you want to move forward, it might be my suggestion that the resolution include opportunity for the city attorney and city administrator to enter a 2-year lease if amenable or agreeable by the proposed property user.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, like I say, I don't know how much time you spend on this every year tracking him down or whatever the case may be. It probably isn't a lot, but a lot of farmers, especially on larger acreages, which this isn't, want to know that they have something available for a year or two.
Would you want to extend it this year for another year if he's agreeable, or next year look at 2 years?
Well, once again, this season, planting season, growing season is going to be upon us. We don't have people knocking on our door to do anything on this property for right now. I'm just looking at it maybe at a savings because we haven't changed the rent. We don't anticipate changing the rent. This is one where I hate to get opinions of people in the middle of something, but is there anybody that would have a problem with that? Ed?
Could we just do the 2-year lease, but put in there if something would come up that wanted to buy that lot or something, we could break the lease?
We could do something like that, but you'd obviously have to notify him the year before,
but
prior to putting.
Yeah. But then we're getting into more paperwork into this thing here. Maybe here's what I'm going to make a suggestion, and I think you kind of said maybe next year, take a look at it. Then we're more prepared instead of bringing this up at this point. Okay.
I sure can do that.
Yep. All right. Any other questions? The resolution, I'm on the wrong page, sorry.
75.
I'm on the right page. No, 75?
Is it 72?
72, here we go. I was on 75.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I was too.
The resolution authorizing execution of a 1-year lease of Outlot A of the Magner Farm Second Subdivision in and between the city of St. Peter and Brent Annexstead appears on page 72. Is there a motion for approval?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
Boy, it's like stereo. I'm going to go with Emily 1 and Shannon 2. That's what I heard. Any other questions or comments at this time? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember Graham,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the LRIP sponsorship resolution, and Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mayor Zeman and City Council. On pages 73 and pages 74, you will find background information related to our request to allow us to apply for local road improvement program funding. As you can see, we've got 3 projects out there that we're currently evaluating for construction and for improvement. We feel very strongly that 1 or 2 of those projects could receive consideration this year. This is a similar application process that you've discussed in 2018 and 2019. And so what we're asking you to do tonight is to approve the resolution allowing staff to apply for grant funding. And as I mentioned, the maximum that can be achieved on any one of these projects is $1.25 million. And we have applications that are due March 3rd. So with the approval of the resolution on page 75, your city engineer and myself will get things organized and coordinated and submitted to the state for funding. As I mentioned also, LRIP funding is a point system. And so what we would do then is look to supplement anything that we do not have covered by grant funding with MSA funding. This is slightly different than what we talked about earlier in the year with ATP funding or ATP program funding, where we've got applications in for grant funds. Those are federal. So this is the state side. ATP is the federal side. And I'm available for questions.
All right, questions for Pete? Carrie.
And Pete, this is Carrie. And so for some of these projects, we do require a letter of support from the county or the township. And which of the 3 do we require the letter of support?
What you would see would be on, from the county, we would need support for 361 and for Broadway intersection. And I believe Todd has one of those letters of support right now. The other one probably doesn't have as good a chance of funding because we haven't completed the necessary engineering for that, but should it receive enough points to do so, we can work on those details at that time.
Thank you, Pete.
Anyone else? Brad.
Pete, is Township Road 361, is that gravel road behind the high school?
It is on the west side.
West, yeah.
Okay, and then, so the Broadway and Sunrise, would that be to be putting in a roundabout or just other work to just improve the traffic flow around there?
It would be a traffic flow issue. What we're applying for is in the area of routes of regional significance. The development that's going on out west, that intersection is seeing a high amount of traffic and cross traffic. And so we probably have a little bit of work to do with that intersection yet, but it's good to get that out in front of the evaluators. So even if they're not positive with it this time, it would be in favor the next time.
Yeah, I think that one's really important. I mean, when I go from the high school to the middle school and such, that can get really backed up, so. Thank you.
Anyone else? Pete, were there other projects that we had that were not supported by the county or by townships?
Yes, there were some that we didn't need support for, and then some that they did not really want to support because they thought it would be in conflict with their funding request.
So therefore, we just didn't include them in this? We didn't make a reference to them
Correct.
Anywhere? Okay.
Yeah, not likely to have a chance to, without that support, to get funded.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Emily.
More of a comment. Just wanted to say thank you, Pete, for pursuing grants. I think this sounds like a really great program, and now I'm looking into it a little bit more. I'd never heard of the LRIP program, and I think that's really neat. So thanks for doing this. I know grant writing is a ton of work, so thanks for taking that on.
Yeah, Mr. Domros does a lot of that work for us. And in their relationship with MnDOT has been a real strong point for St. Peter funding.
Jeff's here tonight in the audience, and Jeff, LRIP is letter RIP. Is that what it stands for? Any other questions, comments? If not, the resolution of support for an agreement in pursuit of 2021 Local Road Improvement Program funding from MnDOT for projects to improve Township Road 361, Broadway Avenue and Sunrise Drive intersection, and the Old Minnesota Avenue and West St. Julian Street intersection appears on page 75. Is there a motion for approval?
Emily will so move.
Steve Grams will second, Mr. Mayor.
Emily 1, Steve 2. Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye. Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye. Resolution is approved. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you. You bet, thank you.
Next up, we have a fire relief pension increase request, and Todd, you going to cover this one?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor and members, you received information at your last workshop from Daryl Pettis, who's the treasurer for the Relief Association. Daryl presented lots of numbers and some tables and charts for you, which are included in the packet here tonight as well. The Relief Association meets with you on an every once in a while basis. By that I mean sometimes the span between them coming and asking for a modification might be a year or 3 or even more than that on occasion. You saw, I know in the workshop, that the fund is very, very strong, and because of that, they presented 3 different options for you, and the option that they asked you to consider was, I guess what I would consider, and I think the council might consider as the middle option, an increase from $3,000 to $3,500 per service year in retirement. Again, the information is included in your packet, along with page 85 that shows a little bit of the history of changes or modifications to the relief amount, to the retirement amount that's available for firefighters after their full vesting. I think it's also important to remember that as a part of this, it's not just their money, but the City Council has a fiduciary responsibility to the Relief Association, which means that if at some point the Relief Association doesn't have enough funds to cover all the retirements that take place or all the funding needs that are necessary to cover those retirements, the city would have to chip in dollars, and you have not had to chip in dollars to this fund for a number of years, and the fund still is currently well above over 100% solvent should that need occur. But it is something to think about in the long term. So I think you do this with a balance of understanding that they have to raise these dollars and that you look at this very carefully to ensure that they have the resources necessary, the funding necessary to fulfill the obligation to the retirees when they come up. And again, their request is for a change from $3,000 to $3,500. And that's included in the resolution on page 86. One other item that I'd mention, Mr. Mayor, is that the primary funding source for this is through a surcharge that occurs on fire insurance that the state collects and then provides back to the city and the Relief Association. So that's the primary funding source from this. How they're able to raise the retirement benefit is based really on their investment success. And that's what's really driving your ability to provide for an additional amount should you choose. Again, the resolution is on page 86.
Questions? Not. The resolution approving the Fire Relief Association retirement benefit increase, as Todd said, appears on page 86. Is there a motion for approval?
DeVos will move.
Noel will second.
Brad 1, Shannon 2. Any questions or comments now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have a request for some licenses. Todd?
Mr. Mayor, the information starts on page 87 with a resolution on page 88. This is due to the sale of the Freedom Station. And for those of you that have been in town for a long period of time, you might know it has from a number of different names, but today it's Freedom number 24. And so it's been recently sold to IYS Ventures. And so with that sale is the requirement for them to apply for new licenses for 3-2 beer, tobacco, and soft drink. There's nothing that we found in the application or the background check that, at least from a staff perspective, we would believe would prohibit them from being able to fill out the terms of these licenses. And so that's why it's recommended and on page 88.
Okay. Any questions on the business license applications? Not the resolution approving those licenses, and these are all, as Todd said, to the same company, same address, 624 South Minnesota, for February 23rd, 2021 till June 30th. Well, I guess some of them go through the end of the year.
Yeah, there's different periods for the different
Right.
types of license, Mr. Mayor and members.
For 3-2 off sale, tobacco and soft drinks. Is there a motion for approval?
Carrie Johnson will make a motion to approve.
Ed'll second.
Carry 1, Ed 2. Any questions now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports, and I see I'm supposed to comment on the sales tax exemption on, I think it was Thursday, February 11th. I appeared virtually in the morning before the Senate subcommittee, tax committee, and listened to, no, can't even think what it is, for an hour before they finally got to us. But anyway, went very well, and this is not for approval of our potential 0.5% sales tax increase. This is for a waiver of the sales tax on the materials that we would use for the construction of the new fire hall, which at this time looks like it would be about $350,000 to $360,000, somewhere in there. And then in the afternoon, I met with the House same subcommittee, tax committee, and presented same information basically to them. And both of our representatives, Mr. Frentz in the Senate and Representative Ackland, were there and sponsored the bill and were very supportive. So that's all I've got, unless somebody has some questions on it before we move to Todd.
Mr. Mayor, just one other thing that I'll mention.
Yep.
It's my understanding that probably the first week of March, the local option sales tax may be heard by both the House and the Senate subcommittees, but not sure of that. We haven't come up on the agenda, but that's been the discussion over the last day or two.
Okay, thanks. And Todd?
Mr. Mayor, members, just to close the loop, as you know, at the last meeting, you had a closed session relative to the city administrator contract and took action after that. We're closing the loop because under state law, if you have a closed session at your next regular meeting, or I guess this is maybe a very strict interpretation, since you took action, live action that evening, we may not have had to have a report here, but we're trying to close the loop and make sure. The second item that I have, Mr. Mayor, is city-county meeting discussion. So last week, your committee, which includes Councilmember Johnson, Carrie Johnson, and Councilmember Stephen Grams, they typically meet about every 6 to 8 weeks with the county. In this instance, Steve was unable to be there, but Carrie and I were there virtually to meet with the county folks. Councilmember Johnson, I don't know if you want to talk about this a little bit more, or if you want me to kind of go down the list. The floor is yours if you want to talk about it.
Well, just one thing. So after we just passed the resolution for the LRIP grant, I was looking back at my notes from this meeting, and there was that discussion on that County Road 15 intersection where they did not make a commitment, I guess, at that time to write a letter due to competing projects. So how does that work with, we just approved the, to submit these grants what is the plan then for that project if
Well,
the
so-
county doesn't write a letter of support?
Yeah, so we'll apply without their letter of support.
Okay.
As Pete articulated, I think our goal in this is to be in the hopper, maybe not so much for potential approval this year, but future years. It's nice to get them in front of the group that makes decisions relative to the grant funding. And so I think we'll continue to try and work with the county to solicit their support on some of these. As Pete indicated, it's a point system, and because of the change in the rules, it's better to have that letter of support. But as the mayor articulated, they have other priorities, and I think wish to ensure that their other priorities receive more points than the priorities that you might establish. But that might change next cycle. And so I think you're wise in continuing to move ahead, but that's where it's at. I did receive a letter of support for Township Road 361 from the county engineer, and so that will be included in the packet for the application for that one.
Okay, thank you. It helps to make those connections
Yeah.
in that process. The conversations that really stood out to me were the conversation on solid waste and Project 33. So I'll let you speak to those.
Well, solid waste, we continue to work with Nicollet County, as you know, both at the county garage off Sunrise and at the location that we own across from Pete's office there at the corner of Swift and St. Julian, what typically we call the compost facility. The county maintains some dumpsters there that aren't for dumping, but are for recyclables. And so you may know that we've augmented that a little bit. One of the things that we've had consistent discussion on is our ability and the county's ability to help ensure that people aren't dumping things there like old refrigerators or old mattresses or those type of things, and working together on the video system that's there to be able to provide for catching folks who might be dumping illegally, prosecuting through the city attorney's office if that's necessary, but also to ensure that we are working cooperatively to have the appropriate data to make better decisions relative to the environment and the amount of materials that are being ultimately recycled from your community, or those materials that are being treated as refuse within your community. And so that was a lot of the discussion, and so they're going to go back and think some more and talk with their hauler, which is different than your contract provider. And so there are some ways to make that go, and hopefully we help them with a few ideas about how to make that data more readily available through their hauler. So that's our goal, is to acquire some of that data. And as folks may remember, Mayor and members, as a part of your property taxes, there's about $21 every year. That's an assessment on your property taxes for solid waste, and that goes to Nicollet County and to Tri-County. And so you're helping pay for that recycling that's going on down there that's being done by the county. It's all of our costs that we're sharing in that, so we want to make sure that we're using it appropriately. So, Carrie, does that kind of match the discussion, I think?
Yeah, I think the reason it stood out to me is because there was a lot more problem-solving, ideas, back and forth discussion, and it seemed like there was going to be follow-up at the next meeting, and folks from the county committed to doing that follow-up, so.
Yeah, so I hope they can follow through on that, and we can get some of the data that will help you make decisions into the future. I'm sorry, Carrie, what was the second one that you mentioned?
Project 33.
Oh, Project 33, yeah. So as you know, Mayor and members, we've continued consistently to ask for either cash, money, or in-kind services to be provided as a part of the project that you've worked on and allowed to move forward with the Soil and Water Conservation District. We have competing belief systems in how funding should take place for these things. And so I think it's fair to say that, frankly, I continue to ask the county for money. After all, the water that's flowing into your area is from the county ditch. And they've continued to say that they're not willing to do that. And so we did ask for in-kind services as we move forward. As you know, a few meetings ago, we worked with Soil and Water Conservation District, and your share over about 3 years is about $33,000 to $34,000 per year to match the grant that Soil and Water Conservation District got to help hold back some of that water, or at least slow some of that water, particularly in early spring ground frozen settings. So we're excited about moving forward on that project, and the county is not pledged to assist you. But we continue to ask, and I think that's okay, and we believe that it's appropriate. They continue to point out that under the state law, it is not within their jurisdiction although the area is within the county, their state law is that they can't really do much about that. And the position that I've taken for a number of years has been that, well, so what? We can make up a different set of rules to make this work out to improve not only farmers' drainage, but improve the safety, the treatment of the water as it comes into St. Peter, and control the amount of water that comes into St. Peter. And so we'll continue to ask about that, but I think their interest in helping on Project 33, which by the way is a committee that they started, by the way, I don't think they're going to continue or provide or pledge any assistance to you in the near future. But that doesn't mean there might not be some other opportunity to protect wellhead protection area or to provide for a nutrient trading type scenario in the handling of stormwater going into the future. So we continue to try and plant those seeds in the cleanest water that we can and hope for some additional progress in the future. So, yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, we talked transit. We have a normal battery of discussion items that we talked about, but I think generally maybe a more positive meeting than we've had in the past, although this report kind of doesn't sound like it, but generally more of a positive meeting maybe than we've had in the past, and we continue to look for ways to partner. I know the council has been very clear that partnerships are very important in how we provide services and move forward for our communities. And so we continue to investigate those in the best ways we can and as often as we can.
Oh, one more thing. When we were discussing the business relief, the Nicollet County grants, they did commend Russ for his door-to-door outreach. And so I know Russ isn't on the call anymore, but kudos to Russ.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, that's all I have for you for today.
Okay. Any more questions of Todd on anything else? Shannon?
Thanks. I have a question for Todd, and since Pete's here, he might also be able to follow up. It's been in the news recently, the disaster in Texas, and I think a lot of St. Peter residents are thinking, could that happen to us here? Pete and Todd, you've done a great job in orienting the council to city infrastructure, and I'm wondering if one of you could say a little bit about how things function here in Minnesota, specifically St. Peter, and how we may be similarly or differently structured from Texas and perhaps vulnerable or not to something catastrophic of that nature.
Let Pete answer that one, and I'll fill in any gaps if we aren't covering all the bases, but Pete's going to cover them all, I'm sure.
Sure. Well, there's always a chance whenever you have overhead power lines, they are suspect to weather, whether it be ice, tornado, any variety of different weather conditions. There's always that situation. Now, we do have multiple different feeds and power sources within our region that we could isolate and do a variety of different things. We also have quite a bit of local generation. So we're looking at different options that would impact us. As you guys are aware, you've got a 12 megawatt generation facility up on top of the hill. If we lost power both from the west and from the east, we could do partial loads throughout St. Peter to keep things up. We'd have to switch some of our circuits, or our bays as we call them. We've got 14 bays internally that we use to feed the system, and so we got a variety of options there. Plus all of our utilities, meaning water, wastewater, and our critical infrastructure like City Hall, hospital, our water plants, public works, all have standby generation. So as you guys are aware, during 1998 tornado, we still had a lot of city functions. You had running water, you had sewage movement, and so that was the reason why a lot of our citizens could stay in their homes during those emergencies. So are we suspect? Yeah, we're a utility, and that's just a fact that's out there. Now, I think of the MISO system, which is, if you look at how electric grids are fed through the United States, the MISO system has a little more redundancy than the other system that failed out there, which is just west of us, and that was felt all the way up into South Dakota related to those treatments. So I don't know if I covered all your questions, but hopefully I did.
So let me
No,
give just
thanks.
a slightly rosier view than Pete. We are much better situated than they are in Texas. The amount of resources that you spent in redundancy, switching, electronic gear, and the generation that you have locally is significant compared to most communities. And as Pete indicated, with your critical infrastructure, water, sewer, one of the biggest challenges that they see in Texas, of course, is boiling water now, because filtration plants don't have electricity, because hospitals don't have electricity. In St. Peter, we'd be in much, much better shape for that critical infrastructure than what we see throughout most of Texas.
Okay. A few years ago, about 5 years ago, we had a situation where it got very, very cold and we didn't really have any snow cover, and it had kind of highlighted properties, residential properties here in town, that their pipe froze from the city access, and I think those were usually, I think they were corrected, were they not? Or maybe there was an option to correct them at a cost, I think it was.
Yeah, I'll
Or
let
take
Pete
your
talk to
chances.
that one and how they're keeping track of that. And the other thing, Pete, if you wouldn't mind mentioning, a couple of water main breaks too might be handy for people to understand that just a little bit.
Sure. Yep, so what happens with weather like we had the previous 2 weeks was it drives the frost down on roads. Some of the areas where we have older cast iron water mains, we've received a couple water main breaks in the last 10 days here. So we average about 1 break a year, and we've had 2 in the last 10 days. So as we warm up here now, the frost is going to go deeper in the roadways, and so we do have a list of about 19 homes that we monitor because their line is suspect of freezing. So we'll check with staff tomorrow and talk about how much frost was in the street where they dug today. And they had that line off and repaired by about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So there were a lot of people that hardly noticed their water was out, and that was on Union Street. We had another break up on Lauren and Charles here last Saturday, I believe it was. And so those both were repaired by city staff. Did an outstanding job of making things happen there, really minimized the impact to the customers, but not only that, but our budget as well.
Okay. Does Texas have squirrels that they have to deal with?
Yeah,
Armadillos.
All right. Anybody have any other questions? Brad?
More of a comment. Todd, I want to thank you for giving me a new phrase tonight, competing belief systems. I'll remember to use that in my with discussions with my wife in our competing belief systems. So.
I wish I could say I coined that, but maybe it's worthwhile having on a t-shirt. We'll see.
I think so.
All right. Yesterday morning, we lost a very valued employee, and for those of you that did or didn't know Dean, he was Dean Bussey I'm referring to, was a gentle soul from what the dealings I had with him, and will be missed. Before I came down, I checked the obituary, and the funeral arrangements are posted now on the Klein Funeral Home, St. Peter Funeral Home site. So, with that, does anybody else have? Well, let me put it this way: does anybody else have anything to add that does not include an opinion or straw vote on whether council will support or not? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Ed'll make a motion to adjourn.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Ed 1, carry 2. All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, everybody. I know.
Have a good night. Good night.
All right.
So Todd, what is city policy when we have an employee pass away within the 7 hours?
So in
Into their fund or?
Yeah, so in this instance, so we do have a policy. So let me kind of explain how this will impact Dean and his family. So typically,